Between 1994 and 2022, the Georgia Department of Natural Resources logged more than 200 deaths on a single reservoir an hour northeast of Atlanta, a body of water that draws roughly 11 million visitors a year and posts at each of its swim areas. No lifeguard and a sign that reads, "Swim at your own risk." Lake Lanier looks like the safest place in Georgia on a hot afternoon. Blue water, green shoreline, boats humming, families on the sand. It is the most popular lake in the southeast. It is also, by the state's own numbers, the deadliest, and almost no one who drives up to it on a Saturday has any idea. This is the record of why, and of the warning that was never really given. The obvious question is whether deadliest is just a number that follows the crowds. It is a fair question, and it has a clean answer. About 40 miles west of Lanier sits Lake Allatoona, a reservoir with a comparable number of visitors each year. Over the same span, Allatoona recorded roughly a third of Lanier's deaths. Same state, same summers, same kind of crowd. One lake kills 3 times as often as its neighbor, so the volume of people is not the explanation, or not the whole one. Something about this specific water, this specific reservoir, is doing something the others are not. To understand it, you have to look at what is actually under the surface, and what is under the surface of Lake Lanier is a town. Start with what the lake is made of. Lanier is not a natural lake. It was created in the 1950s when the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers finished Buford Dam on the Chattahoochee River and let the water back up over more than 50,000 acres of Georgia, farmland, forest, roads, homes, and the community of Oscarville. The valley did not get cleared the way you would imagine. It got flooded, with much of what stood in it left standing where it was. The obvious question is whether that really matters decades later. The answer is at the bottom of the lake, and the people who go down there describe it in detail. When the valley was flooded, the crews did not fell the forest. According to the volunteer divers who searched the lake, anything below about 35 feet was simply left in place, which means a 1950s forest is still down there. Upright, its branches now strung with decades of snapped fishing line instead of leaves. Divers get ensnared in it. One veteran carries at least 2 knives on every dive for exactly that reason. And it is not only trees. Sonar and dive teams have documented submerged roads, building foundations, the span of an old bridge more than 100 feet down, and the grandstands of a buried speedway that briefly reappeared during a drought. There are wells. There are cemeteries. Over 20 cemeteries were moved or submerged when the lake was filled. That is the first piece of the answer. Lanier is not a bowl of clean water. It is a drowned landscape, and everything in it that can snag, trap, or disorient a person is still there, waiting in the dark. More than 160 small islands dot the lake. They are the tops of the old hills, the high ground of a valley that never got to dry out. Every one of them is a reminder that the flat blue surface is a lid over a place people once lived, drove through, and buried their dead. The water simply rose over all of it and stayed. Now, add the dark itself, because it is worse than most swimmers imagine. The thing that makes Lanier lethal is not just what is submerged, it is that you cannot see any of it coming. The obvious question is how bad the visibility really is. The answer from the divers who work it is near total. One member of the Hall County dive team put it plainly. Within about 20 feet of shore on even a gentle slope, the murk sets in and it becomes very difficult to see, and much beyond that, it is virtually impossible. All light vanishes around 40 feet down. Below that, it is simply black. The lake bed is fine silt, and the slightest disturbance blooms into a cloud that erases what little sight remains. Divers have described falling into things they never saw, One sergeant told of stepping forward on the bottom, starting to drop, throwing out his arms, and feeling brick. He had fallen into the well of a submerged house he could not see, in total darkness, and had to inch his way back out. This is what one local officer called one of the most dangerous things they have ever done, and they are trained, equipped, tethered, and expecting the hazards. Now put an ordinary swimmer in that same water. They cannot see the drop-off, the branch, the old fence line, the sudden cold. The lake gives no warning because the lake gives no view. Below the pretty blue surface is a room with the lights off, full of furniture, and most people wade in believing it is an empty pool. And every so often the lake pulls the lid back and shows exactly what it is holding. During the severe drought of 2007, Lanier's water receded so far that docks ended over nothing but mud and silt, and structures that are normally deep underwater broke the surface. At one point, the exposed concrete grandstands of the long-submerged Gainesville Speedway reappeared, a buried racetrack rising out of a shrinking lake. It was a glimpse of the truth the water usually keeps hidden, that a whole built landscape is down there, and that on an ordinary summer day, it sits just far enough beneath the surface to be invisible and close enough to be lethal. Then, there is the cold, which does the killing the debris only sets up. Lanier looks like bathwater at the surface in July. A few feet down, it is a different lake entirely. The obvious question is why temperature matters in a Georgia summer. The answer is a phenomenon called stratification, and Lanier has it badly. The sun warms only the top layer, and below a certain depth the water stays shockingly cold year-round. The dive teams report bottom temperatures in the low 40s, cold enough that they wear dry suits even in the heat of August. Between the warm surface and that cold deep sits a boundary a swimmer can cross in a single stroke or a single step off a drop-off. And Lanier's bottom drops off without warning. You can be standing waist deep, take 2 steps, and be over water 40 feet deep, as one game warden described it. Cross from the warm layer into the cold one suddenly, and the body can go into cold water shock, an involuntary gasp, a spike in heart rate. A few seconds of panic during which even a capable swimmer can inhale water and go under. It is silent. It is fast. And it happens in the exact water where children are playing on a float. That is the machine then. Submerged forest to snare you. Black water so you never see it. And a hidden cold layer to seize your body the moment you drop into it. No single part of it is visible from a beach towel. And Lanier hides one more thing under the surface, the reason so many people believe it is not merely dangerous, but cursed. Here the story turns, and it demands care because part of it is documented history and part of it is myth, and they have grown together. The documented part is this. In September 1912 in Forsyth County, a white woman named May Crow was assaulted and later died. 3 young black men were accused. One, Rob Edwards, was lynched by a mob in the town of Cumming, and 2 others were executed after conviction by an all-white jury. In the terror that followed, white mobs drove virtually the entire black population of Forsyth County, more than 1,000 people, including the residents of Oscarville, off their land in a matter of weeks. Homes and churches were burned. Property was seized. The county remained effectively closed to black residents for decades. That racial cleansing is not legend. It is confirmed by census records, newspapers, court documents, and the work of historians. The obvious question is how that connects to the lake, and here is where honesty matters. The popular story says Lake Lanier was created to drown a thriving black town, sealing the crime under the water, but the Atlanta History Center, which has researched this directly, calls that specific claim a myth. Oscarville's black residents were driven out in 1912, more than 4 decades before the water rose in the 1950s, so the community was long gone before the flooding. The land was taken by eminent domain to supply Atlanta's water, not to erase a living town. What is true is heavy enough on its own. A black community was violently erased from that ground. That same ground was later flooded, and the reservoir was named for a Confederate poet. The haunting, as one historian put it, is not really about ghosts. It is that this is a place where the country's most brutal racial history played out, and then was quite literally submerged. The myth matters here for one practical reason. It has become the lens through which people explain the deaths. Every drowning gets folded into the ghost story, the curse, the vengeful water. And that framing, comforting and eerie as it is, quietly does something dangerous. It turns a set of concrete, preventable physical hazards into fate. You cannot life jacket your way out of a curse, but you can out of a cold water drop-off. Calling the lake haunted is, in a strange way, another form of not being warned. Because the deaths themselves are not mysterious, that is the part that gets lost. Look at the actual record and the causes are painfully ordinary. The obvious question is what actually kills people at Lanier, year after year. The answer from the incident reports is a short and repeating list. No life jacket, alcohol, and open water misjudged. Drowning is the leading cause of death on the lake, and case after case follows the same shape. A man slips off a dock and goes under. A swimmer jumps from a boat without a secured life jacket and never surfaces. A strong swimmer tires far from shore. Nationally, the Coast Guard found that in 2023, around 3/4 of recreational boating deaths were drownings, and that roughly 87% of those victims were not wearing a life jacket. Georgia mirrors it. In Georgia, the law does not require adults to wear one at all, only children under 13. Alcohol runs through the numbers like a current. The state recorded hundreds of boating under the influence arrests in a single recent year, dozens of them on Lanier alone over one holiday weekend. And the toll cluster's exactly where you would expect if these were preventable accidents rather than curses on Memorial Day, the 4th of July, and Labor Day, when the crowds and the coolers are biggest. In 2023, one of the worst recent years, Lanier claimed roughly 13 lives. The deaths spike in the hot months, in the crowded coves, in the unguarded water, the most preventable risk on the lake, as one officer put it, and the least warned against. The cruelest detail is how quiet it is. The public image of drowning, the thrashing, the shouting, the raised arm, is largely a myth. Real drowning is usually silent and fast. A person slipping under without the breath to call out. On a lake with no lifeguards, in water no one can see into, in a cove loud with music and motors, a swimmer can go under a few yards from a crowded dock, and not one person notices until it is far too late. The lake does not announce a death, it simply closes over it. Now layer in the crowding itself, because 11 million visitors do not spread evenly across a calendar. They compress into the same handful of summer weekends on the same water, and that density is its own hazard. Lanier is roughly 59 square miles of surface with 76 boat launches feeding it, and on a holiday Saturday the popular coves fill with houseboats, ski boats, jet skis, and swimmers sharing the same few hundred yards. The obvious question is why crowding turns deadly rather than just annoying. The answer is the collision of speed and water you cannot see through. The Coast Guard consistently traces boating accidents to the same causes: inattention, unsafe speed, and poor lookout, and Lanier concentrates all three. A ski boat's wake can swamp a small craft or knock a swimmer under without the driver ever seeing them, because a person in the water is nearly invisible against that murky surface until a boat is on top of them. The lake's fluctuating level, managed by the Corps for water supply and power, makes it worse. A beach that was sandy one weekend can be rocky the next, and lower water squeezes all that fast-moving traffic into tighter navigation lanes. Add alcohol to a crowded, high-speed, low-visibility waterway, and the mix becomes exactly what the incident reports keep describing. It is not bad luck. It is arithmetic. And when it goes wrong here, It is uniquely hard to undo, which is the quiet reason the death toll runs so high. On most lakes, a drowning is a race against minutes. On Lanier, even the recovery can take days. The obvious question is why a body is so hard to find in a lake with a known shoreline. The answer is everything already described, turned against the rescuers. The same black water, the same silt that blooms into zero visibility, the same submerged forest and cold, deep layers that threaten swimmers also defeat the people sent to find them. The dive teams search largely by feel, in pitch darkness, among branches and fishing line and the walls of submerged buildings, which is why they get called out on the order of a dozen times a year and why some victims are not recovered for days or weeks, and in the lake's grimmest cases are never recovered at all. Local authorities have said plainly that retrieving the dead from Lanier can border on impossible. A lake that hides its hazards from swimmers hides its victims from the searchers just as well. That is the pattern, and it is the part that should stay with you. This is not one freak summer. Across 3 decades, the same reservoir has taken people at a rate its neighbors do not approach, an estimated 15 to 20 deaths a year by some counts, more than 200 confirmed by the state since 1994, with older tallies running far higher. The dive team gets called out on the order of a dozen times a year to search that black water, and the recoveries are so hard that victims sometimes surface days or weeks later, if at all. And the trend lines in Georgia are pointing the wrong way. Boating incidents starting earlier in the season, alcohol arrests climbing, analysts projecting record years. Meanwhile, the front door stays wide open. 11 million people a year, 20 designated swim areas, none with a lifeguard, each posted swim at your own risk. No adult life jacket requirement. A safety message that lives on brochures and websites most visitors never read. For a lake most visitors believe is exactly as gentle as it looks. The warning exists, technically. It is just nowhere near loud enough for the thing it is warning about. What is known is that the water is not what it appears to be. That the forest is still standing at the bottom of it in the dark, exactly where it was left. That the cold is waiting a few feet under the warm, and the drop-offs give no notice, and the causes of death have been the same preventable handful for 30 years. And that 11 million people will come again next summer, spread their towels, hand their kids afloat, wade out past the rope into water they cannot see into, trusting that a place this beautiful, this crowded, this ordinary, could not possibly be the deadliest lake in the region. The signs say swim at your own risk. Almost no one reads them as a body count, and the lake keeps its own counsel, the way still water always does, holding a drowned town and everything that has joined it, patient beneath a surface that has never once looked dangerous.